The dropship rattles and groans, its metal frame screaming against the pressure of an alien atmosphere. Outside the viewport, there's nothing but absolute blackness, a darkness so total it feels alive. This is Xylos, a world untouched by starlight, a planet wrapped in eternal night. Inside, Sergeant Vance's voice cuts through the chaos, sharp and unshakable. "Lock and load," he commands. "We're claiming this rock for humanity, no matter what's waiting down there." His words aren't just an order, they're a promise. A vow spoken in the cramped, trembling belly of a ship diving headfirst into the unknown. For a moment, everything narrows to that single, defiant statement, echoing over the blaring alarms and the thrum of engines pushed to their limit. Imagine plunging into a world where the sun never rises, where every shadow could conceal ancient terrors and every step forward is a step into the abyss. That's the reality for these Earth Marines, humanity's first and last line of defense in a galaxy that doesn't always welcome us. We often hear stories of brave explorers and fearless soldiers, but this is something else entirely. This is a mission born not just from duty, but from sheer, breathtaking audacity. The kind of story that reminds us why we look up at the night sky and dream of conquest, of discovery, of pushing further than anyone thought possible. You're about to witness one of the most extraordinary chapters in human expansion, a tale of courage, darkness, and the unyielding spirit that defines us even when everything seems stacked against us. This isn't just a battle for territory, it's a fight for legacy, for the right to stand tall in a universe that often feels designed to keep us small. So lean in and let's journey together into the heart of that eternal night. What awaits on the surface of Xylos is more than just conflict, it's a test of what humanity can achieve when we refuse to back down. The ship's landing gear crunches against alien soil, a sound swallowed almost instantly by the suffocating silence. Stepping out into Xylos is like stepping into a sensory deprivation tank. The air is cold and still, and the darkness is a physical weight against their visors. Sergeant Vance's voice is a low, steady hum in their comms, directing the squad to form a secure perimeter. Their helmet lamps slice through the black, creating stark, shifting islands of light in an ocean of nothing. And in that light, they see the life of this world. Twisted fungal trees weep a viscous, glowing sap, and carpets of moss throb with a soft, eerie bioluminescence. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, a landscape that feels both ancient and deeply aware of their intrusion. Every shadow seems to hold its breath, every pulsing light feels like a watching eye. It's Corporal Elena Lai who breaks the tense silence, her voice tight and controlled, cutting through the squad's shared channel. "Sergeant, I've got movement at 3 o'clock. Thermals going haywire, something big and fast." In that split second, the atmosphere on the channel shifts from high alert to pure adrenaline. Before Vance can even form a response, the darkness erupts. They don't so much emerge from the shadows as they are the shadows given form and horrifying purpose. Multi-limbed creatures, all chitinous claws and lashing tendrils, pour from behind the phosphorescent flora. They move with a nightmarish speed, a skittering, silent tide of aggression. The valley explodes into a storm of light and sound. Muzzle flashes strobe against the eternal night, illuminating glimpses of the horror. A serrated limb raised high, a gaping maw lined with needle-like teeth. The Marines fire disciplined, controlled bursts, their training kicking in even as primal fear claws at their minds. But the creatures are relentless, using the darkness itself as a weapon, melting back into the black only to reappear meters closer from a different angle. A pained scream tears across the comms as Private Jenkins is dragged down, his leg caught in a crushing grip. Another Marine, Rodriguez, staggers back, a deep gash across her armored shoulder plating, her rifle falling silent. As suddenly as it began, the attack ceases. The remaining creatures melt back into the oppressive dark, leaving the Marines gasping for air in the sudden quiet. their lamps illuminating the swirling, acrid smoke from their discharged weapons and the slick, dark fluid staining the alien ground. They tend to their wounded quickly, applying biofoam and pain inhibitors, their movements sharp with urgency. There's no celebration, no relief at surviving the ambush. Only a grim, cold realization that settles over them all. This wasn't a random encounter with wild animals. The coordination, the tactics, the sheer ferocity. This world isn't just dangerous. It's hostile, it's intelligent, and it has made its first declaration of war. Pushing forward from the site of the ambush, the squad moves with a new, grim purpose. The initial shock has worn off, replaced by a hyper-vigilant caution that has every Marine scanning the shifting shadows, their weapons held tight. Sergeant Vance leads them into a narrow, winding canyon, its walls sheer and slick with the same faintly glowing moss they'd seen before. The path forces them into a single file line, their world shrinking to the small circles of light cast by their helmets. The only sound the crunch of their boots on the strange, brittle rock underfoot and the low, rhythmic cycling of their suit air filters. It's a claustrophobic march, the high walls feeling like they're closing in, amplifying the sense that they are being watched, herded even deeper into the planet's embrace. It's there, carved into the very heart of the canyon wall, that corporealized light catches it, a structure that is unmistakably artificial. It's not a natural rock formation. The geometry is all wrong, all sharp, non-right angles and seamless joints, made of a dark, obsidian-like stone that seems to swallow the light around it. It's ancient, crumbling in places, with great chunks of it having succumbed to time and whatever passes for weather on this lightless world. But despite its dilapidated state, it hums. A low, sub-audible vibration that they feel in their bones more than hear with their ears, a steady, rhythmic pulse that cuts through the absolute silence. Tech specialist Reyes is at the base of the structure in an instant, his scanner whirring to life, its screen casting a blue glow on his faceplate. He runs a gloved hand over the surface, brushing away millennia of dust and mineral deposits to reveal intricate glyphs carved into the stone. They're unlike any language in the Alliance database, a complex series of interlocking geometric shapes and spiraling patterns that seem to shift and move if you stare at them for too long. The rest of the squad forms a defensive perimeter, their lights pointed outward, but their attention is unavoidably split, drawn to the ancient monolith and the low thrum of power it still possesses. Reyes works with a frantic, focused energy, his fingers flying across his datapad, running decryption algorithms and pattern recognition software. Minutes stretch into what feels like an hour, the only sound his muttered curses and the constant, unnerving hum of the structure. Then he goes very still. "Sergeant," he says, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief that cuts cleanly through the comms. "This isn't just ruins, it's a guidance system. A beacon." He points to a specific cluster of glyphs that are pulsing in time with the structure's hum. It's triangulating a position, emitting a directional signal. And it's still active. It's pointing us deeper inland toward the source. The implications of his discovery hang in the air, heavy and profound. This changes everything. They aren't just on a hostile planet, they are walking through the graveyard of a lost, advanced civilization, one that left behind technology functioning after who knows how many thousands of years. This mission just transformed from a simple territorial claim into an archaeological find of unimaginable significance. But before that revelation can even fully settle, the ground beneath their feet shudders violently. It's not an earthquake, it's more localized, more focused, a deep, grinding tremor that feels like something colossal is stirring just beneath the surface of the planet. Rocks clatter down from the canyon walls above them, and the ancient structure's hum seems to intensify for a moment, as if in warning. The path forward is clear, laid out by an intelligence that existed long before humanity ever reached the stars, but it is a path that is very clearly and very dangerously guarded. Following the beacon's silent call, the squad presses onward, the canyon walls eventually giving way to a terrifyingly vast cavern. Their helmet lights fail to find a ceiling or the far walls, their beams simply fading into the endless black above and around them. The only path forward is a narrow, natural rock bridge that arches over a chasm of such profound depth that their scanners simply read error. It is a filament of stone spanning an ocean of nothing, and they have no choice but to cross it. Sergeant Vance orders them to go one at a time, weapons at the ready, each step a test of nerve on the precarious footing. They are halfway across when the ambush is sprung. It doesn't come from the front or the rear, but from above and below simultaneously. These new creatures are larger, their carapaces thicker, and they move with a chilling, calculated precision. They don't just attack, they isolate. One moment the bridge is clear, the next it is a chaotic battlefield in 3 dimensions. A creature drops from the unseen ceiling, landing directly between Corporal Lai and Private Kowalski, its talons screeching against the rock as it cuts off their line of retreat. Another surges up from the lip of the chasm, its mass slamming into the center of the bridge to separate the squad in 2. Vance's voice is a roar over the comms, cutting through the panic. Fall back, they're not attacking, they're corralling us, they're herding us into a kill zone. But the order comes a fraction of a second too late. The creatures use the narrow confines of the bridge perfectly, feinting attacks to force the Marines into tighter groups, their movements too coordinated to be mere instinct. This is tactical, intelligent. As Kowalski turns to provide covering fire, a whip-like tendril lashes out from the darkness below the bridge's edge, wrapping around his ankle with a sound like cracking ceramic. He's yanked off his feet with terrifying force, his rifle clattering onto the stone. For a heart-stopping moment, he dangles over the abyss, held only by the creature's grip and the desperate hands of the Marine next to him. The squad's fire concentrates on the tendril, rounds sparking against its armored hide, but it's like trying to cut steel cable with a pea shooter. With a final, powerful jerk, the creature below pulls Kowalski free. His scream is a raw, terror-filled sound that doesn't end as he falls. It simply echoes, growing fainter and fainter, swallowed by the unimaginable depth of the chasm until there is only silence. The attack ceases as abruptly as it began, the creatures melting back into the void from which they came, their objective achieved. The surviving Marines are left breathless and shaken on the narrow bridge, the void around them feeling more malevolent than ever. There is no time for grief, no moment for a eulogy. The chilling truth of their situation settles over them with the weight of a tomb. They are not fighting animals. They are fighting a predator with a sophisticated, brutal intellect, one that knows the terrain intimately and uses it as a weapon. It sees them not just as invaders, but as prey to be strategically broken down and harvested. The mission has irrevocably shifted from one of discovery to one of pure survival against an enemy that understands the art of the hunt on a level they are only beginning to comprehend. The cave offered a temporary illusion of safety, its entrance a narrow fissure in a towering rock face that they sealed with a portable sonic barrier. Inside, the only light came from the dim glow of suit indicators and the faint, sickly phosphorescence of the fungal growths clinging to the walls. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, sweat, and the coppery tang of blood from their wounds. There was no conversation, only the heavy, exhausted breathing of soldiers trying to process their losses and the chilling efficiency of the enemy that had taken one of their own. Tech Specialist Ray sat apart from the others, his datapad connected to the squad's long-range comms unit, his fingers moving almost frantically across the screen in a desperate attempt to find a clean channel, to hear anything other than the oppressive silence of Xylos or the memory of Kowalski's fading scream. And then a sound. It was faint at first, buried under layers of cosmic static and interference from the planet's strange magnetic field. A crackle, a hiss, and then, unmistakably, a human voice. It was broken, distorted, as if shouting across an impossible distance and through a storm. every Marine stiffened, their heads turning toward the source of the sound. Reyes cranked the gain, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to clean up the signal. The voice became clearer but no less terrifying. It was a man's voice, ragged with panic and exhaustion, each word punctuated by the sizzle of static. "Repeat, this is Captain J. Miller of the U.E.S. Odyssey. We are claiming this world for Earth. Our position is..." The signal dissolved into a wave of noise before surging back, the voice now sharp with raw, undiluted fear. "They're not in the dark, they're in the light, they're in the light. We failed. God, we failed." A final, piercing burst of static, followed by a scream that was cut off with a horrifying finality. Then nothing, only the return of the dead, empty silence, now feeling infinitely more menacing. In the aftermath of the transmission, the cave felt colder, smaller. The faint, pulsing glow from the walls no longer seemed beautiful or strange. It felt mocking, like the glint in a predator's eye. Corporal Lai was the first to speak, her voice a hushed whisper. "The Odyssey, that was a deep scout vessel. It went missing 2 years ago. They listed it as presumed lost with all hands in a navigation anomaly." Her words hung in the air, confirming what they all already knew. They were not the first to set foot on Xylos. They were simply the next in a line of visitors, and the ones who came before had not left by choice. Sergeant Vance had been standing near the cave entrance, his gaze fixed on the blackness beyond their sonic barrier. He didn't turn around, his shoulders were set, his posture rigid. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, gravelly, and carried a weight that crushed the last vestiges of hope for a simple extraction. "You heard the man," he stated, the grim certainty in his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're not the first here, and whatever took them out. It didn't leave, it's still around." He turned then, his face illuminated by the suit lights, etched with a resolve that went beyond mere military duty. This was no longer about planting a flag or securing resources. The ghost of Captain Miller and his crew had handed them a new mission, one far more personal and infinitely more dangerous. They were now the inheritors of a mystery, the sole witnesses to a tragedy they were determined not to repeat. That broken transmission, a message in a bottle from a doomed ship, didn't fuel their fear, it ignited their resolve. They would find out what happened to the Odyssey. They would uncover the truth of this light-forsaken world, not just for their own survival, but for the souls of those who had already been lost to its darkness. Leaving the cave and the ghost of the Odyssey behind, the squad pushes deeper into the cavernous expanse, their every sense strained against the oppressive silence. It's the faint, almost imperceptible sound of moving water that eventually guides them, a soft, liquid sigh echoing through the subterranean vastness. Following the sound, their helmet lights sweep across the rock until they catch it, a river, but this is no ordinary flow of water. It glows with an intense, ethereal blue light, a brilliant, snaking ribbon of radiance cutting a path through the endless dark. Its luminescence is so powerful it casts their shadows long and stark against the cavern walls, illuminating the scene in a cold, clinical light that reveals everything. And what it reveals is a nightmare. The banks of the river are littered with the dead, skeletons picked clean by time, and whatever scavengers call this place home are locked in a final, desperate embrace of combat. Some are clearly human, their remains still clad in the corroded, familiar plating of U.E.S. Odyssey expeditionary armor. Others are the bizarre, multi-limbed frames of the native Xylos creatures, their chitinous carapaces lying shattered next to their foes. Rusted, unfamiliar rifles lie near human skeletons, while the fossilized, scythe-like claws of the aliens are still embedded in human ribcage. It's a frozen moment from a war that ended long before any of them were born, a macabre diorama of mutual annihilation. Corporal Lai stops at the edge of the gruesome tableau, her light fixed on a human skeleton whose armored hand is still clamped around the throat of a fallen alien. Her voice, when it comes over the comms, is quiet, hollow with the weight of the discovery. "This wasn't an ambush or a hunt," she says, the words hanging in the air. This was a battlefield, a last stand, and from the looks of it, both sides lost. Her assessment turns the cavern from a mysterious landscape into a tomb. The glowing river isn't just a geographical feature. It's a monument to a forgotten conflict, its light a eulogy for the fallen on both sides. As they move cautiously along the riverbank, giving the long-dead combatants a wide berth, a new sound begins to permeate the air. It starts as a low hum, barely discernible over the gentle rush of the luminous current, but the further they travel, the more distinct it becomes. It resolves into whispers. Not the hiss of static or the wind through strange rock formations, but what sounds like actual, layered voices, hundreds of them, murmuring just at the edge of hearing. There are no words they can understand, only a chaotic tapestry of emotion. Faint cries of anguish, guttural sounds of fury, and desperate, pleading sighs that seem to rise directly from the glowing water itself. It's a psychic echo, a recording of the final moments of every soul who fell on these banks, forever imprinted upon the strange, light-giving liquid. The effect on the Marines is immediate and visceral. Private Rodriguez flinches, swinging her rifle toward the river as if expecting an attack from the water itself. Tech Specialist raises hands shake as he tries and fails to get a reading on the phenomenon, his instruments showing nothing but the chemical composition of the fluid. There is no scientific explanation for the chorus of the dead that now seems to swirl around them, pressing in on their minds. Sergeant Vance doesn't need to give an order. A single, sharp gesture of his hand is all it takes. The squad's pace quickens from a cautious advance to a near jog, a collective, unspoken need to get away from the whispering water and the accusing gaze of the skeletons it illuminates. It's then that the massive structure comes into view, its outline emerging from the darkness at the far end of the cavern. The river of light seems to flow directly toward it, almost like a pathway leading to its entrance. It is a colossal ziggurat, a pyramid of the same dark, non-reflective stone as the monolith they found in the canyon, but on a scale that dwarfs anything they've yet encountered. It towers into the blackness above, its peak lost to sight, its sides carved with the same intricate, shifting glyphs that pulse in time with the river's glow. This is no mere ruin or beacon. This is a citadel, the source of the signal, the heart of the mystery, and the almost certain origin of the intelligent horror that hunts them. The Whispering River has led them to the doorstep of the very thing they were sent to find, and as they stand before its immense, silent presence, the echoes of a long-lost war feel chillingly close to becoming their own. The sheer scale of the structure before them defies immediate comprehension, a mountain of polished shadow that seems to swallow the very light from their helmets and the radiant river. This is no mere ziggurat, it is a fortress, a brutalist monument of obsidian-like stone fused seamlessly into the very bedrock of the cavern, its spires clawing up into the darkness overhead. As they draw closer, the air itself begins to crackle with palpable energy, jagged forks of unnatural lightning, a violent and sickly violet hue, arc silently between the towering spires, casting fleeting, monstrous shadows that dance across the fortress's impossibly smooth surface. The whispering from the river seems to fade, replaced by this new, electric hum that vibrates deep in their teeth. Tech Specialist Reyes is already at work, his scanner whirring frantically, its readings spiking into the red. He looks from his datapad to the colossal source of the energy and back again, his voice a mix of terror and exhilaration. "Sergeant, these energy signatures. They're off the scale. This isn't just a building, it's a power generator, a planetary scale one." He gestures wildly at the readings, the interference, the darkness field that blankets this entire world. It's being manufactured right here. This machine is why Xylos has never seen a sunrise. A wild, desperate hope flashes in his eyes, theoretically. If we can get inside, if we can find a way to shut this thing down or even disrupt its core, we might actually see the sun here for the first time in millennia. That sliver of hope, that monumental goal, galvanizes the squad. The mission crystallizes in an instant, transforming from a grim fight for survival into a proactive, defiant strike. They are no longer just prey being hunted. They are saboteurs at the gates of the enemy's greatest weapon. They advance with a new purpose, using the jagged rock formations and petrified fungal forests as cover, their movements swift and silent. The air grows thicker, buzzing with the immense power pouring from the fortress, making the hair on their arms stand on end even through their armor. They are within 50 meters of a massive, seemingly seamless entrance when the fortress decides it has tolerated their presence long enough. With a sound like tearing metal, hexagonal panels slide open on the structure's face. From these dark apertures, emerald green plasma fire erupts, not in wild bursts, but in precise, calculated arcs that slice through the air where they had just been standing. The ground at their feet vaporizes into superheated glass, and the roar of the impacts is deafening, drowning out Sergeant Vance's shouted commands. This is no ambush by biological hunters. This is a cold, impersonal defense system. There is no rage, no cunning strategy of isolation, only flawless, automated execution. The plasma turrets track their movements with inhuman accuracy, their fire patterns herding the Marines away from the entrance and into a killing field of open ground. They are pinned down behind a low ridge of rock, the air above them sizzling with lethal energy, each bolt a reminder that the intelligence they face is not merely biological. It is ancient, technological, and utterly merciless. The fortress isn't just protecting itself, it is the dark heart of the planet, and it has just begun to defend its eternal night. They are pinned utterly and completely, with emerald death scything the air just above their helmets. Every attempt to move is met with a fresh volley of plasma that turns the rock around them to molten slag. Sergeant Vance knows they have seconds, maybe less, before their cover is obliterated or the automated system flanks them. His mind races, discarding one desperate plan after another, until his gaze falls on Corporal Davis's pack. Davis, the shape charges, the wall 40 meters left of the main entrance now. He barks, the order leaving no room for hesitation. Corporal Davis doesn't flinch. He scrambles along the base of their crumbling ridge, the plasma fire tracking his movement, forcing the rest of the squad to lay down a torrent of suppressive fire that sparks and whines uselessly against the fortress's armored skin. Reaching the spot, his movements are a blur of trained efficiencies, lapping the magnetic charge against the unnaturally smooth stone, setting the timer and diving back into cover. The 3-second countdown feels like an eternity, the hum of the turrets the only sound in their world. Then, the world turns inside out. The detonation isn't just loud, it's a physical shockwave that punches the air from their lungs. A gout of fire and shattered obsidian rock vomits outward, and where there was once an impenetrable wall, there is now a jagged, smoking maw. Go, go, go. Vance roars, and they move as one, pouring through the breach before the dust has even settled. The interior is a cavern of humming darkness and cold, blue light emanating from strips set into the floor. They aren't in a hallway, they are in a vast antechamber, and they are not alone. Awaiting them are silent, multi-limbed automatons, sleek, polished drones of the same dark stone, gliding on anti-gravitic fields, their single optical sensors burning with the same emerald hue as the plasma turrets. There is no warning, no demand for surrender. The instant the Marines cross the threshold, the chamber erupts into a storm of controlled, precise violence. The firefight is a brutal exchange of sound and fury. Kinetic rounds from the Marines' rifles chip and crack the stone drones, but their return plasma fire is far more devastating, melting through armor plating with terrifying ease. The air fills with the sizzle of superheated air, the deafening report of rifles, and the shriek of rock on metal. They are fighting a holding action against an endless tide, buying inches of ground at a terrible cost. Suppressing fire on the left flank, Rodriguez, hold that corridor, Reyes, get to that control panel. Vance's voice is a steady anchor in the chaos, directing the storm. Tech specialist Reyes darts through the chaos, ducking under a searing plasma bolt that vaporizes the drone behind him. He slides the last few feet to a raised dais, his datapad already syncing with the alien interface. Glyphs flash across the screen, his fingers a blur as he fights not just the enemy's code, but the architecture of an alien mind. With a final, triumphant stab of his finger, a massive set of inner doors hiss open, and the drones in the immediate area power down, their green eyes flickering out. The sudden silence in their section of the chamber is deafening. Pushing through the open doorway, the squad stumbles into a sight that steals the breath from their lungs. They stand in a grand hall of incomprehensible scale, a cathedral of ancient science. The ceiling is lost in shadow miles above, and the center of the room is dominated by a colossal, crystalline core that pulses with a rhythmic, violet light, the source of the planet-wide darkness field. But it is what surrounds the core that roots them to the spot. Encased in pillars of shimmering energy that look like amber, suspended in a state of perfect stasis, are thousands upon thousands of the native Xylos creatures. They are not moving, not attacking. They are frozen, their forms arranged in silent rows that stretch away into the gloom, a museum of a captured species. Corporal Lai approaches the nearest pillar, her rifle lowering. "My God," she whispers, her voice hushed with a terrible awe. "It's not a fortress, it's a prison." A battery, the horrifying truth of Xylos unfolds before them. The intelligent, ferocious creatures that have been hunting them aren't the masters of this world, they are its fuel. The very life force of the native species is being harvested, siphoned away to power the engine that keeps their planet in perpetual night. The coordinated attacks, the tactical brilliance, it wasn't the strategy of a dominant civilization. It was the desperate, furious struggle of a captive population trying to break its own shackles, to stop yet another group of outsiders from stumbling in and dooming them all. They weren't fighting monsters, they were fighting inmates, and they had just blown a hole in the wall of their cage. The revelation of the prison battery hangs in the air, a truth so monstrous it recontextualizes every moment of terror they have endured. The enemy they've been fighting, the cunning, ferocious hunters, are victims on an unimaginable scale. As this new reality settles, a faint, rhythmic sound cuts through the low hum of the stasis field, a weak, desperate tapping, like metal on stone, coming from a narrow alcove shrouded in shadow behind one of the glowing amber pillars. It is a human rhythm, a code every Marine knows: 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS, Sergeant Vance signals for silence, and the squad moves as one, weapons trained on the alcove. What they find inside chills the blood more than any alien horror. Chained to the wall by energy manacles that flicker with a weak, dying light is a man. Or what's left of one. He is clad in the tattered, scorched remnants of an Odyssey expeditionary suit, the unit patches faded but unmistakable. He is emaciated, his face a skeletal mask of grime and old scars, his eyes sunken deep into their sockets. But those eyes are wide, impossibly aware, burning with a frantic, captured intelligence. Tech specialist Reyes deactivates the manacles with a burst from his tool, and the man crumples into Corporal Lai's arms. He weighs almost nothing. As Lai administers a stim shot and a sip of water from her canteen, his eyelids flutter. A wet, rattling breath escapes his lips, and he begins to speak, his voice a dry whisper that seems to be dredged up from the very bottom of a well of agony. He speaks not to them, but through them, his gaze fixed on some horror only he can see. You have to understand the darkness, he rasps, each word a monumental effort. It's not empty, it's not an absence, it's alive, a consciousness, ancient and cold, that blankets this world. He coughs, a wet, terrible sound. The creatures, the ones you fought, they're just animals, smart, yes, but animals, they fight us because they know we feed it. He gestures weakly toward the pulsating crystalline core in the center of the hall. This machine, it doesn't just make the dark, it feeds the dark, it siphons their life, their light, their very hope, and it feeds it. He grasps Vance's armored vambrace with a shockingly strong grip, his eyes finally focusing, locking onto the sergeant's with terrifying clarity. "We came, just like you, Captain Miller. We tried to claim this world for Earth. We thought we were conquerors." A horrifying, skeletal smile touches his lips. "But you cannot claim the dark claims you. It gets inside, into your thoughts. It feeds on your light, your hope, your will, until there's nothing left but a shell. Waiting to be used." His body convulses once, a final shudder, and the light in his desperate eyes begins to fade. His last words are a breath, a mere exhalation of absolute truth that settles over the Marines like a physical weight. "We didn't fail the mission, Sergeant. We were the mission, we were the meal." With that, the last of his strength leaves him. His head lolls to the side, and the crushing silence of the fortress returns, now infinitely more menacing. The Marines are left staring at the body of a man who didn't just die from his wounds. He was consumed, his spirit eroded over years of imprisonment by an entity they cannot see, cannot shoot, and barely comprehend. The firefight with the drones, the strategic ambushes by the natives, these were tangible threats they could face. But this is something else entirely. Their true enemy is not the creatures, not the fortress, not even the planet itself. Their enemy is the eternal night, and it is hungry. The survivors' final, damning words hang in the cold air of the chamber, a truth more terrifying than any ambush. The squad stands paralyzed, not by fear of combat, but by the sheer cosmic horror of their situation. They are not just in a fortress, they are in the belly of a beast, a living engine of despair that has been feeding for eons. The pulsating, violet light from the colossal core at the room's center seems to beat in time with their own frantic heartbeats, a rhythmic, predatory thrum that feels less like machinery and more like a heartbeat. It calls to them, a siren song of absolute negation. Sergeant Vance's voice cuts through the dread, low and steady, a lifeline thrown into an abyss. "Rays. That thing, what is it?" Tech specialist Rays approaches the core, his scanner emitting a frantic, panicked series of chimes. He circles the massive crystalline structure, his eyes wide behind his visor, not with wonder but with a dawning, horrific understanding. The core isn't built, it's grown. Its surface isn't polished stone, but a smooth, obsidian-like carapace, veined with throbbing filaments of that same violent light. It radiates an intense, soul-numbing cold that their environmental suits struggle to counteract. It's a nexus, Rays breathes, his voice trembling with a mixture of scientific awe and primal terror. The entire fortress, the machinery, it's just a housing, a cage for this thing. This isn't a machine, Sergeant. It's a biological entity, a heart. And it's not just generating the dark, it is the dark. It's sustaining this entire planet's eternal night. The implications are universe-shattering. They are not facing a technology to be dismantled, but a life form to be slain, a god of shadows that has wrapped a world in its own essence. A fierce, quiet debate erupts over the comms. Private Rodriguez advocates for immediate action, her voice tight with the urge to strike back. "We have the charges, we blow it now and get out." But Corporal Lai argues for caution, her mind reeling from the survivor's warning. And what if that releases whatever it is? What if the darkness doesn't vanish but just becomes uncontained? They are trapped in an impossible choice, a gamble with the fate of a world hanging in the balance. To destroy it could be an act of salvation or an apocalyptic mistake. As Vance weighs the decision, the very air in the chamber begins to change. The hum of the core deepens, shifting from a sound into a pressure, a weight that presses down on their minds. The shadows around them, once static, begin to swirl and coalesce. drawing inward from the edges of the vast hall like ink pouring into water. They don't need their helmet lights anymore. A new, source-less illumination fills the space, a twilight that reveals everything yet clarifies nothing. The swirling darkness mass in front of the core solidifies, taking a form that is at once shifting and horribly specific, a humanoid shape of pure, starless night, with eyes that are not eyes but voids into a deeper, colder nothing. And then it speaks, not a sound that travels through the air, but a thought that forms directly inside their skulls, a voice that is the mental equivalent of absolute zero. It is calm, ancient, and carries the weight of geologic time. You persist, you struggle. It is the nature of your fleeting light to do so. The thought is not hostile but observational, the way a mountain might observe a leaf blowing against its side. You speak of claiming, of destruction. You believe you can shatter the night with your little fires, the form gestures, a motion that seems to draw the very hope from their souls. You cannot claim what already owns you. Your arrival was not an invasion, it was a delivery. You have brought your light, your warmth, your defiant, beautiful spirit directly to my table. And for that, you have my gratitude. The voice holds no malice, only the patient, terrifying certainty of a fundamental law of the universe. The true heart of darkness has welcomed them home, and it has been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. The voice in their minds shifts, losing its detached, cosmic indifference and taking on a tone of chilling intimacy. But your struggle is so inefficient. So wasteful, the form of coalesced darkness ripples, and for a fleeting second, each marine sees something different within it. A lost lover, a fallen comrade, a pristine earth landscape, a childhood home. You burn so brightly, and for such a short time, you are sparks in a hurricane destined for extinction. I offer you something more, something permanent. The shadows flow like liquid, encircling them not as a threat but as an embrace. Images flood their minds, not as words but as pure, overwhelming sensation. They feel the crushing strength of immortality, the invulnerability of a form that never tires, never ages, never fears. They see themselves not as conquerors of this world, but as its rightful kings and queens, commanding the very creatures that hunted them, their will enforced by the endless night itself. The promise is intoxicating, a seductive whisper that bypasses reason and speaks directly to the primal desire for survival and power. Lay down your arms. Embrace the quiet. Your light will not be extinguished, it will be made eternal, a part of something infinitely greater than your fleeting mortal lives. You will never know fear or loss again. For a heartbeat, the offer hangs in the air, a tantalizing escape from the certain death that surrounds them. Then Sergeant Vance takes a single, deliberate step forward, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. He doesn't shout. His voice is a low, gravelly thing, stripped of all fear and filled with a defiance that is uniquely, fundamentally human. We've heard offers like yours before. He states, every word a hammer blow against the silence. From tyrants, from monsters, from things that think power is a substitute for principle. He raises his rifle, not to fire, but to point it at the heart of the swirling entity, a gesture of pure, unadulterated refusal. Earth doesn't negotiate with monsters. We put them down. The reaction is instantaneous and vicious. The entity's placid offer curdles into a psychic tsunami of pure rage. The comforting images vanish, replaced by a sensory assault designed to shatter their sanity. The chamber dissolves around them. Private Dyer's screams, dropping his rifle to claw at his helmet as he's suddenly back on the bridge, watching Kowalski's terrified face vanish into the abyss, but this time it's his own hands letting go. Corporal Lai stumbles, her world turning to fire as the ghosts of the Odyssey crew surround her, pointing accusing fingers, blaming her for their damnation. Tech specialist Reyes cries out, his precious data streams twisting into a chorus of voices screaming his name in agony, but it is Dyer's who breaks completely. With a raw, incoherent shout, he opens fire, his rifle on full auto. In his mind, he's cutting down the spectral figures of his fallen squad mate, of the alien horrors lunging from the walls. In reality, his wild spray of ricocheting round sparks and whines against the ancient machinery, forcing the rest of the squad to dive for cover not from the enemy but from their own. Dyers stand down, they're not real, Vance bellows, but the private is lost, trapped in a hell of the entity's design. It takes both Rodriguez and Lai to tackle him, wrestling the screaming, thrashing Marine to the ground and pinning his arms until the seizure of panic passes, leaving him sobbing and broken on the cold floor. The hallucinations recede as abruptly as they arrived, leaving the Marines gasping, their hearts pounding, the taste of copper and fear thick in their mouths. The entity had not fired a single plasma bolt. It hadn't needed to. It had simply turned their own minds against them, demonstrating with cruel efficiency that its most terrifying weapon wasn't its automated defenses or its captive legions, but its ability to weaponize their deepest regrets and most profound fears. The battle for Xylos had just shifted from the physical to the psychological, and they were hopelessly outgunned. The psychic assault recedes as suddenly as it began, leaving the Marines disoriented and gasping on the cold floor, their minds struggling to re-anchor in reality. In the echoing silence that follows, the low hum of the crystalline core seems to swell, no longer just a sound but a gloating, predatory presence savoring their psychological unraveling. It is tech specialist Reyes who moves first, scrambling toward her discarded datapad, her hands shaking not from fear now but from a cold, focused rage. It's a distributed network, she mutters, her voice a tight wire of concentration as her fingers fly across the screen, pulling up schematics of the fortress's insane architecture. The core is the heart, but its consciousness is routed through these auxiliary conduits. It's how it projects the hallucinations. Before Sergeant Vance can formulate an order, the entity strikes again, not with images this time, but with a physical manifestation of its will. The very floor beneath them groans and shifts, sections of the obsidian-like material liquefying and reforming into grasping, solid tendrils that whip upward, aiming to ensnare their legs and drag them down. Simultaneously, from alcoves high above, a new wave of the sleek stone drones detaches, their anti-gravitic fields humming to life as they descend with their emerald optics burning. They are caught in a pincer movement, the floor itself becoming a weapon while death reigns from above. Reyes doesn't look up from her screen, even as a tendril of living rock shatters against the console next to her, spraying her with fragments. I found a primary control nexus. It's a direct interface, she shouts over the rising cacophony of plasma fire and shrieking stone. But it's a one-way trip. The feedback will be catastrophic. Her eyes meet Vance's, and in that split second, a silent, terrible understanding passes between them. This isn't a request for permission, it's a statement of fact. She has found the only play left on the board, and it requires the ultimate price. Vance's response is instinctual, a commander's refusal to sacrifice a soldier. Reyes, negative, find another way. He roars, emptying his rifle's magazine into an advancing drone. But Reyes is already moving, diving through the chaos toward a pulsing, exposed console that glows with the same violent violet energy as the core itself. Energy arcs around her, lashing at her armor, scorching the plating as she physically jacks her datapad into the alien port. There is no other way. She screams back, her voice cracking with strain as raw power courses through her equipment and into her. I can override its local control, cause a partial collapse. It'll buy you time, go now. Vance takes a step toward her, his hand outstretched, a gesture of futile denial. But her head whips around, and through her cracked visor, he sees not fear but a fierce, blazing determination. Claim this rock for us, Sergeant, she yells, her voice now raw with pain and a profound, final defiance. Then she slams her fist down on the final command sequence. The result is instantaneous and apocalyptic. The console she is connected to detonates in a silent, blinding flash of white light that vaporizes her instantly. But her sacrifice is not in vain. That pure, defiant human energy, her will, her spirit, now floods into the entity's ancient, corrupted network. All across the Grand Hall, the pulsating violet light of the core and its conduits flickers erratically, stuttering between violet and a blinding, painful white. The entity's form of coalesced darkness shrieks, a silent, psychic scream of agony and rage that lances through their minds as its control is violently disrupted. The floor stops moving, the tendrils crumbling to inert dust. The drones in mid-air shudder and drop like stones, shattering on the ground. For a single precious minute, the heart of darkness has been given a heart attack. Vance doesn't waste the second she bought them. Move to the higher ground now, he barks, his voice hoarse with a grief he cannot afford to feel. They scramble over the fallen drones and the now stable floor toward a raised platform of rock that offers a defensible position, their boots slipping on the debris. They leave behind only a scorched mark on the floor and the echoing, defiant words of a Marine who refused to be consumed. She didn't just buy them time, she gave them a weapon far more powerful than any charge or rifle. She proved that even the oldest, coldest darkness could be burned, if only for a moment, by a spark of pure, selfless light. The platform offers scant protection, a momentary reprieve bought with a terrible sacrifice, and the Marines use every second of it. As Vance and Rodriguez lay down a storm of covering fire, their shots sparking against the shuddering machinery, Corporal Lai is on her knees, her datapad jacked directly into a secondary console, its screen a frantic waterfall of alien glyphs and corrupted data streams. She's not just looking for an exit, she's digging, a digital archaeologist racing against an entity that is already rebooting, its violet light stabilizing, its psychic presence returning as a low, furious growl in the back of their minds. Then she goes utterly still. "Sergeant," she says, her voice a hushed, reverent thing, entirely out of place amidst the chaos. "I found it. I found the original architect's logs." On her screen, the violent, chaotic glyphs resolve into clearer, older patterns, depicting a species of slender, luminous beings with a profound, almost religious reverence for a brilliant, nurturing star. "This place, we had it all wrong. It wasn't built by the dark to feed itself. It was built against the dark by them." She points to the images of the light worshippers. They called it the Umbra Citadel, a prison designed to contain the entity, to quarantine its influence to this single world. The history unfolds in fragmented data entries, a tragic story of a desperate last stand. The entity, a primordial consciousness of absolute negation they called the Tenebrae, had been found drifting between stars, a void that consumed light and life. The builders lured it here to a world they could sacrifice and constructed this immense machine not to power the darkness, but to bottle it, using the captured native life force as a buffer, a containment field to keep it sedated and trapped. They weren't monsters, they were jailers who built the perfect prison and then died guarding it, their civilization fading into dust while their creation continued its eternal vigil. Lai's eyes scan faster, her fingers flying as she pieces together the final, crucial fragment. The containment required a constant energy source, a counter-frequency of pure photonic energy to keep the Tenebrae's influence in check. They built a reactor for it, deep beneath us, a sun forge. She looks up, her face illuminated by the screen, a light with a hope so fierce it challenges the oppressive gloom of the chamber itself. The entity didn't just block out the sun, Sergeant. It subverted their machine, perverted the sun forge's purpose. It turned their tool of light into its own engine of darkness. Her voice rises, sharp with urgency and revelation. But the forge is still down there. The core architecture is intact. If we can reach it, if we can trigger a full ignition cycle, we wouldn't just disrupt the field. We could flood this entire fortress, this entire planet, with a sunrise that hasn't been seen in 1,000,000 years. We could burn out the heart of this thing permanently. The promise is a lifeline, a goal so monumental it eclipses their fear, but the path to salvation is a death sentence in itself. Her screen displays a schematic of the Citadel's underworld, a nightmarish, multi-level labyrinth of sheer drops, crumbling architecture, and unstable energy conduits that have been warped by the entity's influence. And it is still patrolled by the original builders' automated defense systems, Guardians of Light, turned into corrupted sentinels of shadow, their programming twisted to protect the very thing they were meant to destroy. The central access shaft is the only way down, Lai states, her tone grim. The builders sealed it when they lost control. It's a straight drop through the oldest, most unstable part of the structure, right into the nest of every residual defense protocol that's been running on corrupted code for millennia. To reach the hope of light, they must first descend through the deepest, most lethally guarded darkness the entity can muster. The access shaft isn't a passage. It's a wound, a ragged tear descending into the planet's deepest, oldest guts. The Marines rappel down into a stifling, oppressive silence, their lights doing little to push back a darkness that feels ancient and hateful. The air is thick with the smell of ozone and decay, and the walls are no longer smooth, alien architecture, but rough, weeping stone veined with pulsing, sickly purple filaments. This is the Undercroft, a place even the entity's control seems to warp and distort. They are descending into a labyrinth of echoes where every sound is a lie and every shadow holds a personal nightmare. It starts subtly, a faint whisper that could be the wind through a distant vent, a scrape of boot on rock that seems to come from just around a corner that doesn't exist. Then the whispers solidify, layering into a chorus of familiar voices that coil around their minds. Private Rodriguez hears the panicked, final transmission of the Odyssey's captain, but this time the words are directed at her. "Why didn't you come sooner? You could have saved us." She flinches, her grip tightening on her rifle, her breath catching in her throat. Ahead, Dyer stumbles, his head whipping around as he clearly hears Corporal Reyes' voice, not her final, defiant shout, but a sobbing, accusatory plea. "You let me die. You just stood there and watched." The corridors themselves seem to shift and change, a maddening maze designed to disorient and isolate. A hallway that was straight moments ago now curves back on itself. A doorway they just passed through is now a solid, seamless wall, forcing them to find another route, each step taking them deeper into the psychological trap. The entity is no longer throwing drones or plasma bolts. It is weaponizing their own grief, their guilt, their most profound regrets, turning their minds into the true battlefield. The losses mount not from combat but from despair. One Marine, a young private named Chen, simply stops, lowers his rifle, and walks into a side passage, muttering about seeing his sister, his form swallowed by the shadows never to be seen again. There is no shot, no scream, only a terrible, silent subtraction from their number. For Sergeant Vance, the attack is brutally specific. As they pause at a four-way junction, the whispers around him coalesce into a single, crystal-clear voice he hasn't heard in 15 years. It's his younger brother, Liam, his tone not angry but unbearably sad. "You told me you'd watch my six, Marcus. You promised. You left me behind on that rock." The voice is perfect, a heart-wrenching echo from a past battle on a different world, a loss that has haunted Vance's every command decision since. The corridor in front of him seems to melt, reforming into the dusty, canyon-strewn landscape of Tarkus Prime, the air filling with the smell of smoke and cordite. He can see Liam, his armor breached, hand outstretched. For a heart-stopping second, Vance freezes, the old wound tearing open with fresh, agonizing intensity. The guilt is a physical weight threatening to drive him to his knees, but then his jaw clenches. His eyes, hard and focused, sweep the illusion, seeing not the ghost of his brother, but the cruel, manipulative artistry of the enemy. His voice, when it comes, is a low, feral growl that cuts through the phantom sounds, a vow made not to the memory, but against the thing that dared to use it. Not this time, he snarls, the words dripping with a venomous resolve. I am not leaving anyone else behind to this thing. He doesn't fire. He simply turns his back on the illusion, and as he does, it shatters like glass, the corridor snapping back to its grim, dark reality. His act of defiance seems to create a bubble of clarity, the whispers receding slightly for the entire squad, a testament to a will that even the ancient darkness cannot fully corrupt. They push forward, their numbers dwindling with every twist and turn, claimed not by claws but by crippling doubt and heartbreak. The path is littered with the psychic residue of their own fears, each step a trial against an enemy that knows them better than they know themselves. Yet, driven by Vance's unwavering example and the fading echo of Ray's sacrifice, they press on, drawn toward a low, rhythmic thrum of power that grows louder with every painful meter gained, the pounding of the corrupted sun forge calling them to their final stand. The final corridor opens not into another claustrophobic passage, but into an immense cathedral-like space that steals the air from their lungs. This is the sun forge chamber. The dome above is lost in a vault of darkness so high their helmet lights can't find it, but the center of the room is dominated by a structure that is both beautiful and terrifying in its dormant state. A colossal, geometric lattice of crystalline spires, like a frozen explosion of glass and light, rises from the floor, connecting to a complex network of conduits that spiderweb across the walls and ceiling. But now, those conduits pulse with the same sickly violet energy that powers the entity above, and the crystals themselves are dull, clouded, and veined with creeping black tendrils of corruption. It is a masterpiece of a dead civilization, a captured star, now shrouded and silenced by the very thing it was built to contain. There is no time for awe. As they step into the chamber, the shadows clinging to the far walls begin to detach, not as hallucinations this time, but as physical manifestations of the Tenebrie's will. They pour from the architecture itself, sleek, polished forms of living darkness that solidify into the multi-limbed hunters they've fought before, but these are different. Their movements are more fluid, more precise, their forms shimmering with barely contained violet energy. They are the entity's personal guard, the final line of defense for its heart, and they advance with a silent, chilling purpose. Defensive perimeter now. Vance's voice is a whip crack in the dead air, and what's left of the squad reacts instantly. They form a ragged half-circle around the base of the massive forge, their backs to the crystalline structure, their rifles coming up as one. The air fills with the deafening roar of gunfire and the sizzling shriek of plasma as the two forces meet. Muzzle flashes strobe against the impossible scale of the chamber, illuminating glimpses of the advancing tide. A serrated claw, a gaping maw, eyes that are pockets of absolute void. Rodriguez and Diaz lay down overlapping fields of fire, their controlled bursts dropping the lead creatures, but for every one that falls, two more seem to coalesce from the darkness between the conduits. They are not just fighting an enemy, they are fighting the room itself. While the firefight rages, Corporal Lai is a whirlwind of motion at a control panel set into the base of the main crystal spire. Her datapad is jacked in, its screen a chaotic mess of conflicting code, the builder's original programming fighting a losing war against the entity's corrupting influence. Her fingers fly across the interface, her face a mask of intense concentration under her helmet. "I'm in the ignition sequence," she shouts over the comms, her voice strained. The primary photonic resonance chamber is intact, but it's completely drained. The core pathways are clogged with the entity's energy signature. It's like trying to start an engine with mud in the fuel lines. A plasma bolt sizzles past her head, close enough to leave a scorch mark on the console. She doesn't flinch, her entire world narrowed to the data stream. She fights through layer after layer of security and corruption, using the access codes and schematics she pulled from the architect's logs like a master key. For a second, a brilliant, pure white light flares deep within the clouded crystals, and a harmonic hum, clean and powerful, vibrates through the floor. A wave of desperate hope washes over the squad. Then, just as quickly, the light sputters and dies, choked off by the creeping black tendrils. A system-wide alert flashes on her screen, the glyphs screaming a critical error. Lai slams her fist on the console in frustration. "It's no use," she yells, her voice cracking with despair. The system is too drained. The initial ignition requires a massive, clean energy spike, a jump start more powerful than anything we have on us. Her eyes scan the frantic diagnostics, looking for any solution, any alternative, and then she sees it. Her head snaps up, her gaze locking onto Sergeant Vance, who is reloading his rifle with practiced, brutal efficiency. "The dropship," she cries out, the idea forming even as she speaks it. Its fusion reactor, the output signature, is almost identical to the builder's specified ignition source. If we can hot-wire it directly into the forge's primary conduit, we could channel its entire power output for one massive surge. The audacity of the plan hangs in the air, momentarily silencing the roar of the firefight. They all understand what she's proposing. The dropship is their only way off this rock. Its reactor is their sole source of power for extended operations, for communications, for life support if they need to dig in. Using it means sacrificing any hope of escape, any hope of rescue. They would be burning their only bridge home to make one desperate gamble to save a world that isn't even theirs. And someone would have to fight their way back through the nightmarish undercroft to the landing zone to retrieve it. It is the ultimate all-or-nothing play. The fate of Xylos and their own survival now rests on a perilous journey back into the heart of the darkness they just barely escaped. The decision hangs in the air for less than a second, a single, suspended moment of choice between a slow death in the dark and a final, defiant gamble for the light. Sergeant Vance's mind is already made up, the plan solidifying into a cold, hard certainty. He barks orders without hesitation, his voice cutting through the din of the firefight. "Lai Rodriguez, hold this position. Keep that ignition sequence primed and ready. Dyers, you're with me. We're going back. The journey back is not a retreat. It is a forced march through a waking nightmare." The undercroft, which had been a maze of psychological torment on the way down, is now a fully awakened gauntlet of physical horror. The entity, sensing their purpose, has thrown every remaining resource into their path. The very walls seem to weep with a corrosive slime, and the same shadowy tendrils that had tried to drag them down before now lash out with renewed, furious intent. They are not just fighting their way through a fortress, they are fighting their way through the angry, conscious immune system of a god. Vance and Dyers move as a single unit, a whirlwind of controlled violence. They don't stop to fight, they fight to move. Vance's rifle barks short, precise bursts, each shot aimed to maim or blind a creature just long enough to create an opening. Dyers follows, his own weapon on full auto, laying down a storm of covering fire that fills the narrow corridors with deafening noise and spinning brass. They leap over chasms that weren't there before, duck under sweeping claws that materialize from the darkness, and sprint through corridors that seem to contract and expand with a malevolent will. Vance's voice is a constant, grounding presence in their comms, a litany of commands and encouragement. Left corridor, suppressing fire, go, go, go. Don't look back. They burst out of a secondary fissure and into the overwhelming blackness of the main cavern, their helmet lights stabbing futilely into the void. The journey to the dropship is a desperate sprint across open ground, every second feeling like an eternity. Creatures drop from the unseen ceiling, surging up from hidden crevices, their attacks more ferocious, more desperate than ever. It is as if the entire planet knows what they intend to do and is screaming in protest. Dyers takes a savage blow to his side, his armor cracking under the impact, but he doesn't fall, fueled by adrenaline and sheer, stubborn will. They reach the ship, its familiar, human-made lines a jarring sight in this alien hellscape. Inside, the work is frantic. Vance bypasses safeties with brute force, using his combat knife to pry open access panels while Dyers stands guard at the ramp, his rifle a constant, roaring flame against the tide of shadows trying to force their way in. The fusion core is a massive, shielded cylinder, humming with the promise of escape they are about to sacrifice. Disconnecting it is a complex, dangerous procedure, but Vance works with the frantic efficiency of a man who has accepted his fate. With a final, wrenching pull, the core comes free, its weight immense. Dyers, we're leaving, he shouts, heaving one end of the heavy cylinder onto his shoulder. The return trip is slower, a hellish crawl under the weight of their only hope. They are a beacon, a shining target for the entity's rage. Every step is a battle. Dyers is bleeding badly now, his breath's coming in ragged, wet gasps over the comms, but he never falters, his half of the core held tight. They are ambushed at every turn, the creatures seeming to bleed from the very rock itself. It is in the final stretch, just as the entrance to the sun-forged chamber comes into view, that the worst happens. A colossal form, larger than any they've seen, made of solidified shadow and crackling violet energy, erupts from the ground directly in front of them, its roar a silent, psychic blast that buckles their knees. Vance drops his end of the core, bringing his rifle up, but he knows it's useless. Dyers, however, doesn't hesitate. With a raw, wordless scream of defiance, he shoves his end of the heavy reactor core into Vance's arms, the sudden weight driving the sergeant to the ground. "Get it home, Sergeant," Dyers yells, and before Vance can stop him, the wounded Marine charges directly at the monstrosity, his rifle blazing, his body a final, desperate distraction. The creature turns its attention, and Dyers is swallowed by the darkness, his comms cutting out in a burst of static and a final, cut-off cry. Alone, under the unbearable weight of the core and the weight of another loss, Vance does the only thing he can do. He heaves the cylinder forward, dragging it, pushing it, fighting for every inch toward the light of the chamber ahead. He stumbles into the sun forge room, collapsing under the weight of the core, his armor scarred and smoking, his body screaming in protest. Behind him, the corridor is silent. Dyers is gone. Of the 12 Marines who landed on Xylos, only 3 remain. They paid for this chance in blood and souls, but the key to ignition is finally here. The chamber trembles, a deep, groaning shudder that seems to come from the very bones of the planet. Sergeant Vance drags the heavy fusion core the last few meters, his muscles screaming in protest, and with a final, grunting heave, he slams it against the base of the corrupted sun forge. Corporal Lai is on it instantly, her hands a blur as she rips open an access panel, bypassing melted connectors and fried circuits with a desperation born of absolute necessity. She doesn't have the tools for a clean interface. This will be a brutal, ugly splice. "Rodriguez, cover us. This is going to get loud," she shouts, her voice barely audible over the escalating roar of the entity's fury. She yanks power cables from the core's housing, their ends spitting and crackling with raw, unchecked energy, and jams them directly into the input ports of the forge's ancient conduit. The result is instantaneous and violent. A blinding, white-hot arc of electricity explodes from the connection point, scorching the rock around them and forcing them to shield their eyes. For a terrifying second, nothing happens. Then, a deep, resonant thrum pulses through the floor, a vibration that feels like the first heartbeat of a waking giant. Deep within the clouded, blackened crystals of the forge, a pinprick of pure, golden light flickers to life. On her datapad, a cascade of builder glyphs, dormant for millennia, scrolls across the screen at an impossible speed. A sequence once interrupted has been restored. A single, pulsing numeral appears in the center of her display, searing itself into their retinas, 60. Then 59, 58. The countdown is initiated. Lai screams over the rising harmonic whine now emanating from the forge. It's working, the core is feeding it. But the system's too damaged to regulate the input. We've got minutes before this whole thing goes critical. They haven't just started the engine, they've lit a fuse on a bomb the size of a mountain. The entity's response is a psychic and physical cataclysm. The form of coalesced darkness in the chamber shrieks, a soundless wave of pure agony and rage that lances into their minds, promising an eternity of torment. The chamber itself seems to convulse in sympathy with its master. Entire sections of the ceiling, great slabs of obsidian-like stone, shear away and crash down around them, shaking the ground and filling the air with choking dust. The remaining defenders, the shadowy hunters, don't just advance, they dissolve into a frenzied, screaming tide of darkness, throwing themselves at the Marines with a complete disregard for their own existence. They are no longer fighting to capture or corrupt, they are fighting for survival, and their attacks are utterly, horrifyingly suicidal. Rodriguez stands her ground, her rifle a constant, thundering extension of her will. She fires until the barrel glows cherry red, her shots precise and deadly, but the tide is endless. Creatures leap over the bodies of their fallen, scrambling across the ceiling, clawing their way up from fissures opening in the floor. Each one she cuts down is replaced by two more. They're everywhere, she yells, her voice tight with strain as she's forced to switch to her sidearm, her rifle clicking empty. The light within the forge grows, the pinprick expanding into a steady, brilliant glow that pushes back the oppressive violet haze. The corrupting black tendrils veining the crystals begin to smoke and wither under its intensity. With every second that ticks down on the countdown, with every pulse of light that grows stronger, the entity's assault becomes more desperate, more unhinged. The darkness isn't just attacking them. It is trying to physically smother the nascent star being born in its heart, to claw its way back into the machine and snuff out the light before it can become an unstoppable dawn. They are no longer just soldiers in a firefight. They are the guardians of a fragile, waking sun, protecting its first breaths against the dying throes of an eternal night that will do anything to keep its hold on the world. The final perimeter is a shrinking island of light and defiance in a sea of absolute night. Sergeant Vance, Corporal Lai, and Private Rodriguez form a desperate triangle around the violently humming fusion core, their backs to the nascent star forge. There is no cover, no fallback position, only the ground beneath their boots and the certainty that they must hold it. The entity's final, furious onslaught is not an attack. It is an extinction-level event given form. The shadow beings do not simply advance, they crash against the Marines' position in a silent, screaming wave of claws and void-filled eyes, a physical manifestation of the planet's hatred for the light being born in its heart. Vance's voice is a raw, grating thing, stripped of everything but pure, undiluted command. He doesn't speak, he roars, and the words are a weapon in themselves, a counterspell against the suffocating despair. For Earth, for light, the battle cry is not a slogan. It is a creed, a final testament shouted into the teeth of the abyss. It is answered not with cheers, but with the thunderous, disciplined report of rifle fire, the sizzling shriek of plasma cartridges, and the brutal, close-quarters impact of combat knives on chitinous flesh. They fight with a terrifying economy of motion, every movement calculated to maximize carnage and buy another precious second. Rodriguez, bleeding from a gash on her temple, fires her weapon until it overheats, then uses it as a bludgeon, her screams matching the ferocity of the shadows. Lai, while trying to monitor the countdown on her datapad, uses her sidearm to pick off creatures that scramble over the mounds of twitching bodies, her shots precise and coldly efficient. They are not just fighting for their lives, they are fighting for the memory of Diaz's sacrifice, for Reyes' final, defiant act, for the lost crew of the Odyssey, and for every soul this darkness has ever consumed. Each creature that falls is a victory. Each second that ticks off the countdown is a universe won back from the void. Vance becomes an anchor, a fixed point of sheer, stubborn will. He empties his rifle, draws his sidearm, and when that too clicks empty, he fights with his knife and his fists, a whirlwind of controlled, brutal violence. A shadowy tendril wraps around his leg, trying to pull him from the circle, and he simply hacks it apart, his movements relentless. He is no longer just a man, he is the embodiment of the promise he made, to claim this rock to be the light that answers the dark. The air itself begins to change, charged with a new, impossible energy. The initial pinprick of light within the forge swells, pushing back the violet corruption, its golden radiance intensifying with every beat of the countdown. The shadows shriek in a silent, collective agony, their forms beginning to smolder and dissolve at the edges under the increasing glare. The entity's assault becomes even more frenzied, more desperate, but it is a dying beast's last convulsive thrash. The Marines can feel the heat on their backs, a warmth so profound and alien on this frozen world that it feels like a physical embrace. They are battered, bleeding, and on the verge of collapse, but they hold. They hold for the 55th second and the 50th and the 45th, their circle unbroken, their defiance a wall against the night. They have become the guardians of the dawn, and they will not yield. The countdown on Lai's datapad hits 0. For one terrifying, silent second, nothing happens. It is the quiet at the epicenter of a detonation, the universe holding its breath. Then the Sun Forge erupts. It is not an explosion of fire and debris, but a silent, expanding sphere of pure, undiluted dawn. The light is a physical force, a tidal wave of incandescence that radiates outwards from the crystalline heart of the fortress. It does not illuminate, it consumes. The shadows that claw at the Marines do not retreat, they vaporize, their forms turning to wisps of screaming smoke that are erased in an instant by the overwhelming brilliance. The entity's final, psychic shriek is not a sound, but a sensation of absolute, universe-ending agony that floods their minds and is then abruptly silenced. The ancient, suffocating presence that has haunted their every thought for days is simply gone. Scoured from existence, the wave of photonic energy does not stop. It slams into the obsidian walls of the grand chamber, and the sound that follows is the sound of a world breaking its chains. The fortress, a monument to eternal night built to contain a god, cannot withstand the fury of the star it was meant to emulate. Colossal fissures race up the walls, branching like lightning, and with a groan that shakes the very planet, the ceiling begins to crack apart. Great slabs of the dark stone shear away and crash down, but they are met not with more darkness, but with a sight none of them ever believed they would witness. Sunlight, true, natural, unfiltered stellar light. It streams through the fractures in the vaulted ceiling, golden and warm, cutting spears of radiance through the swirling dust of the collapsing fortress. It falls upon their upturned faces, and for a long moment, the three remaining Marines can only stand there, paralyzed by the impossible beauty of it. The artificial, violent glare of the Sun Forge begins to fade, its purpose fulfilled, but the real light from above remains, growing stronger with every second as more of the ceiling falls away to reveal the sky. They climb through the rubble, their movement slow and awestruck, emerging from the shattered shell of the Umbra citadel onto a broad, rocky plateau. They stand together, their battered armor glinting, and look out upon Xylos. The planet they had known only as a formless, suffocating blackness is gone. In its place is a stark, barren landscape of gray rock and deep canyons, all of it bathed in the gentle glow of a sun that has not touched this soil in millennia. It is not a lush, green world, it is a scarred and empty one, a canvas wiped clean, but it is bathed in light. The oppressive, entity-manufactured darkness is utterly banished, replaced by deep, long shadows cast by a real sun in a real sky. The air itself feels different, crisp, clean, and still, holding the promise of morning rather than the threat of an endless midnight. They stand in a silence that is no longer ominous but reverent. The only sound is the whisper of a wind that now feels like a breeze and the distant, settling rumble of the fallen fortress. There are no cries of victory, no cheers. The cost has been too high, the victory too profound for mere celebration. They simply bear witness. They watch as the light continues to grow, chasing the last remnants of gloom from the deepest crevices, revealing the true, stark geometry of the world they have fought so desperately to save. It is a barren land, yes, but it is no longer a tomb. It is a world reclaimed, not just from the darkness, but for the light. And as the first true sunrise in a million years reaches its full strength, warming the cold rock beneath their boots, they understand that their claim has been irrevocably staked. Not with a flag, but with a dawn. The silence that follows is profound, a stark contrast to the cacophony of war that had filled this space just moments before. For a long moment, the three surviving Marines simply stand there, their breathing the only sound in the vast, sun-drenched quiet. The adrenaline that had sustained them through the final, desperate battle begins to ebb, and in its place comes a wave of pure, bone-deep exhaustion and the slow, dawning ache of their injuries. Sergeant Vance's armor is scorched and dented, a long crack running across his faceplate. Corporal Lai favors her right arm, the shoulder joint likely dislocated from the force of a creature's blow. Private Rodriguez methodically applies a thick layer of biofoam to a deep gash on her leg, her hands trembling only slightly from the aftershock. Their movements are slow, deliberate, as they begin the grim, necessary work of securing the area. There is no celebration, no triumphant shouting. Their victory feels too large, too costly for something so simple. They move among the shattered remains of the shadow creatures, which are already beginning to desiccate and crumble under the unfamiliar touch of true sunlight, as if the entity's magic was the only thing holding their forms together. They check the bodies of their fallen comrades, a somber duty that yields no miracles. Each confirmed loss is a fresh weight added to the immense burden of their survival. It is only when the immediate perimeter is secure that Vance finds a relatively clear spot amidst the rubble and opens a channel to the command ship waiting in high orbit. The comms crackle to life, the static-sounding alien now against the clean, open air. His voice, when he speaks, is not the roar of a conqueror, but the steady, gravelly tone of a man reporting a simple, unchangeable fact. There is no boast in it, only the heavy weight of truth earned through unimaginable sacrifice. Command, this is Sergeant Vance of the U.S. Vanguard. Xylos is claimed, the darkness is broken, awaiting further instructions. The message is short, devoid of the details of the nightmare they endured, because how could words ever capture it? The statement stands on its own, a monument to their achievement. As he signs off, Corporal Lai approaches, her datapad in her good hand. She's been running atmospheric and geological scans, her scientist's mind already shifting from survival to analysis. The data on her screen tells a story as incredible as their own. Readings are stable, Sergeant, she says, her voice filled with a quiet awe. The electromagnetic interference is gone. The atmospheric composition is within habitable parameters, a little thin but breathable with minimal filtration. Solar radiation is at expected levels for a system of this class. She looks up from the screen, her gaze sweeping across the rocky plains now bathed in gentle light, seeing not a barren wasteland but a future. The planet can now support life, our life. Her words hang in the air, laden with a significance that goes far beyond a scientific report. It is a statement of reclamation, of potential pulled from the jaws of oblivion. This isn't just a territory one, it is a cradle, empty and waiting. The eternal night was not just an enemy to be defeated, but a shroud that had to be lifted, and in doing so, they haven't just won a battle, they have unlocked a door for all of humanity. The first chapter on Xylos was written in shadow and blood, but the next one can be written in light. As the dust settles and the stark new reality of a sunlit Xylos sinks in, the Marines begin the arduous task of searching the ruins of the fallen citadel. It is a grim, methodical process, sifting through the rubble of a dead god's prison. It is Corporal Lai, drawn to a chamber that somehow withstood the final cataclysm, who makes the discovery that redefines their entire understanding of the enemy they faced. The walls here are lined with crystalline data slates, and unlike the corrupted systems upstairs, these seem to have been shielded, preserved by the builders as a final record of their failure and their warning. The data is fragmented, a history told in shattered pieces, but the story it tells is one of cosmic horror on an unimaginable scale. The entity they called the Tenebrae was no natural phenomenon. It was a predator, a parasitic intelligence of pure negation that drifted between stars, a conscious void that sought out worlds rich with life, not to consume their resources, but to feed on the very concept of light, hope, and sentience itself. The records show glimpses of other worlds, vibrant, teeming civilizations of beings of gas and light, vast fungal networks that sang in harmony, silicon-based life forms that communicated through shifting geometric patterns, each one encountered by the Tenebrae, each one ultimately extinguished, their suns dimmed, their populations reduced to hollowed-out psychic fuel for the entity's endless hunger. Xylos was not its origin point. It was merely its latest feeding ground, and the builders were not its creators, but the brave, desperate species that managed to trap it here, sacrificing their own world to cage the beast and save the rest of the galaxy. This revelation settles over them like a frost. Their battle was not an isolated incident. It was the latest chapter in a billion-year war against a cosmic parasite. And they, a handful of humans from a planet that had only just learned to reach for the stars, had become the unlikely victors. The weight of that legacy is immense, and it brings with it a solemn, crushing sense of responsibility. They stand in the quiet of the archive. The true scale of tech specialist raises sacrifice finally coming into full, heartbreaking focus. Her action was not just a tactical gambit to save her squad. It was a strike against a darkness that had devoured entire civilizations. She didn't just throw a switch, she avenged worlds. Sergeant Vance finds her datapad later, partially melted but still intact, recovered from the scorched console where she made her stand. He holds it in his hands, the weight of it feeling far heavier than its physical mass. The screen is cracked, but it still holds the final command sequence she initiated, the last testament of her will. The squad gathers, their helmets removed, standing in the unfamiliar sunlight as Vance speaks, his voice low and thick with an emotion that is both grief and ironclad resolve. She saw the way through when the rest of us only saw the wall, he says, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the two Marines left. She gave us this victory. She gave everyone this victory, and we will make it mean something. We will make sure that her light and the light of everyone we lost here was not spent in vain. That promise becomes their new mission, the foundation of their next most critical order. The transmission to command is no longer just a report of success. It is a request for reinforcements, for engineers, for scientists, and for a mandate. The strategy shifts instantly from extraction and exfiltration to permanence and vigilance. They will not leave Xylos to the silence of its new dawn. They will establish a permanent base of operations, not just as a monument to the fallen, but as a guardian post, a lighthouse built upon the grave of the darkness, its beacon a constant watch against the void, ensuring that the entity or anything like it can never again find a foothold here. They will plant the flag of humanity not as conquerors, but as stewards, as the new jailers of an empty cell, honor bound to stand watch so that the light they fought so hard to win will never again be stolen from the universe. The transmission to Earth is not a simple status update. It is a victory cry sent across the light years, a declaration carved from sacrifice and etched into the very fabric of a reclaimed world. Sergeant Vance's voice, though weary and scarred by the ordeal, carries a resonance of absolute, unshakable certainty as he speaks into the calm. He details their success with the stark, unadorned facts of a military report, but then his tone shifts. It deepens, taking on the gravity of a prophet or a poet who has stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Tell them, he says, the words rolling out with the weight of an epoch-changing truth. The Marines brought the dawn to eternal night. It is more than a boast, it is a foundational statement for the entire history of this world. It is the first line in a new chapter of human expansion, a claim staked not with a flag but with the sun itself. The response from command when it crackles through the static is immediate and thunderous. There is no hesitation, no request for verification. The sheer, audacious truth of their achievement is its own verification. The voice from the command ship, usually so measured and procedural, is thick with a mixture of awe and frantic activity. Reinforcements are already being scrambled. A full fleet of engineering corps, colonial administration teams, and additional marine security detachments are being routed and prepped for immediate departure. They are not just sending help, they are mobilizing an entire armada of civilization, hurling it toward a world that, just hours before, was considered a lost cause, a tomb of darkness. The message is clear. Earth's claim on Xylos is now absolute and uncontested. The planet, baptized in fire and light, is officially under human stewardship. This sudden, massive commitment solidifies the reality of their victory in a way that finally allows the surviving Marines to process what they have truly accomplished. They are no longer just survivors in a hostile land. They are the vanguard, the founding sentinels of a new human outpost. The barren, sunlit rocks around them are no longer just a battlefield. They are the future foundations of a city. The silence is no longer ominous but pregnant with potential, soon to be filled with the hum of generators, the voices of settlers, and the industry of a people who have been given a new world. The stage is set for an expansion unlike any other, not a slow, grinding colonization of a wild frontier, but the rapid, triumphant settlement of a galaxy-class prize, a world literally reborn through their actions. They have not only secured a territory, they have unlocked a future, and the entire weight of humanity is now turning its gaze and its resources toward this newborn dawn. The days that followed were a blur of methodical exploration and staggering discovery. With the entity's influence utterly scoured from the planet, the ruins of the Umbra Citadel were no longer a place of dread, but a library of lost wonders waiting to be deciphered. The surviving Marines, their numbers heartbreakingly small, became archaeologists, soldiers transformed into scholars by the magnitude of what they had uncovered. They moved through the stabilized sections of the fortress, their movements cautious not out of fear of ambush, but out of reverence for the secrets they were unsealing. It was in a chamber sealed behind a wall of harmonic resonance, a lock that only responded to a specific frequency of light, which Lai managed to replicate using their remaining equipment, that they found the true legacy of the builders. The room hummed with preserved energy, and as their lamps swept across it, they illuminated walls covered not in the violent, corrupted glyphs of the entity's reign, but in elegant, flowing script and intricate schematics that glowed with a soft, internal luminescence. This was no prison archive, this was a vault of hope. Here were the untainted dreams of the light worshippers, perfectly preserved against the darkness that had consumed the rest of their civilization. The schematics were not for weapons or containment fields, but for something far more profound, planetary genesis. Lai spent hours poring over the data, her datapad whirring as it translated the complex alien mathematics into something she could comprehend. She traced the lines of massive atmospheric processors that could scrub toxins and reintroduce vital gases, designs for geo-regulators that could gently stimulate volcanic activity to warm the planet's core and stabilize its tectonic plates, and blueprints for vast orbital mirrors that could precisely manage solar exposure, coaxing a biosphere into existence from barren rock. This was a master plan for nothing less than the creation of a world. She found Sergeant Vance overseeing the construction of a temporary comms array, his face still etched with the grief of their losses but his eyes clear with purpose. "Sergeant," she said, her voice trembling not with exhaustion but with a barely contained, radiant excitement. She held up her datapad, the screen alive with the beautiful, impossible designs. "We were wrong about their ultimate goal. The containment was a means to an end, a desperate pause. Their real plan was always this. She zoomed in on a breathtaking holographic rendering that showed Xylos transformed. The gray, rocky canyons were replaced with deep green valleys and shimmering blue lakes, the sky a gentle azure dotted with clouds. This isn't just a rock we've claimed. This is a blank slate. We can turn this into a paradise, Sergeant, a beacon for humanity. A world reborn from the dark, more beautiful than anything we could have imagined. Their gift wasn't just a prison, it was the tools to finish their work. The implications were universe-altering. This was no longer just about establishing a military outpost or a mining colony. They were being handed the keys to a Genesis machine. Vance's mind, trained for tactics and survival, began to race with the logistics of a dream. The first priority shifted from simple defense to aggressive preparation. They began cataloging every resource, every mineral deposit revealed by the new sunlight, every stable geological feature that could serve as a foundation. The landing zone was transformed into a bustling forward operating base with a new, singular focus, readying the ground for the first colony ship. The transmission to command was updated, the request for reinforcements now accompanied by the stolen blueprints of a dead race, a plea not for more soldiers, but for visionaries, engineers, botanists, climatologists, and dreamers. The work was grueling, each day a marathon of physical labor and mental focus under the unfamiliar sun. But a new energy fueled them, a potent cocktail of hope and hard-won light. Every scanned mineral vein was a future building block, every stabilized plot of land a future garden, every cleared landing pad a welcome mat for the future. They were no longer just survivors in a graveyard. They were gardeners preparing the soil for a harvest they would likely never see fully mature, driven by the profound understanding that their victory had granted humanity the rarest of gifts, a second chance to build a perfect world, not from scratch but from the ashes of a long-forgotten war. The sunrise on the third day was no longer a novelty but a promise kept, a golden constant in a sky that had known only black. It was under this new sun that Sergeant Vance gathered the remnants of his squad. Their armor was scarred, their bodies weary, but their posture was different now, not the tense readiness for an ambush, but the solid, grounded stance of sentinels. "Command is sending the fleet, but they're weeks out," he began, his voice carrying easily in the thin, clean air. "That makes us the law, the garrison, and the first line of defense until they get here. We claimed this rock with our blood and our light. That means we defend it." The statement was simple, final. It wasn't a question of duty, but of ownership earned through unimaginable sacrifice. In that moment, they ceased to be an expeditionary force and became something far more permanent, the guardians of a dawn they had personally wrested from the void. Their new purpose transformed the barren landscape from a conquered battlefield into a sovereign territory to be secured. The high ground overlooking the shattered ruins of the citadel became their command post, a strategic vantage point where they could watch the sun track across the stark, beautiful canyons. With an efficiency born of grim experience, they unpacked the long-range motion sensors and seismic monitors from the damaged dropship, the technology feeling almost crude compared to the ancient wonders they had just witnessed. Corporal Lai repurposed the ship's damaged comms array, boosting its signal to create a rudimentary early warning network that painted a digital picture of the silent plains below. Each blip on the scanner, each hum of a placed sensor, was a stitch in the fabric of a new security blanket they were weaving over the planet. They were not just looking for residual creatures, they were listening for the slightest echo of the darkness, any hint that the silence might again become a predatory thing. Every patrol along the canyon rim, every systems check, was performed with a meticulous care that honored their fallen comrades. This was no longer a mission, it was a vigil. And as they worked, the sun rose again and again, its consistent arc overhead becoming the rhythm of their new lives. There was a profound symbolism in its unwavering journey, a daily reaffirmation of their victory. The light no longer felt alien or invasive, but like a partner in their watch. It revealed the landscape in all its honest, rugged detail. The sharp edges of the rocks, the deep, clean shadows in the gullies, the way the dust motes danced in the warm air. For the first time since they had crashed into the eternal night, they could work without the oppressive weight of their helmet visors, feeling the genuine warmth on their faces. This simple, profound sensation, the kiss of sunlight on skin, was the greatest testament to their triumph. It was a constant, quiet reminder that their defiance had rewritten the very laws of this world, replacing an ancient curse with the simple, glorious truth of a new day. They were the keepers of that truth, and they would ensure that this light, paid for so dearly, would never again be stolen. The distant, familiar thunder of fusion engines began as a low hum, a sound that was once a promise of extraction but now signaled the beginning of a far greater undertaking. Sergeant Vance stood on the high ridge overlooking the landing zone, his helmet tucked under his arm, feeling the alien wind, a real wind, not the stagnant, cold breath of the void, brush against his face. Above, the sky, once an impenetrable blanket of absolute black, was now a clear, brilliant blue, streaked with the fiery contrails of the reinforcement fleet as they descended. Great, hulking troop carriers and sleek, agile engineering corvettes broke through the atmosphere, their shapes glinting in the morning sun like avenging angels finally able to breach the heavens. He watched them come, a silent sentinel against the backdrop of a world reborn. Around him, the few who remained, Corporal Lai and Private Rodriguez, took their places at his side, their postures no longer just those of soldiers but of pioneers. The sheer scale of the arriving armada was a physical testament to the significance of their victory, a response from a humanity that had just been handed a future it never knew it had a claim to. The first ship, a colossal behemoth emblazoned with the Earth Marine insignia, settled onto the scorched landing pad with a ground-shaking finality, its ramps lowering to disgorge the first wave of the new world. Fresh-faced Marines in pristine armor fanned out with disciplined efficiency to secure the perimeter, their eyes wide as they took in the sunlit, desolate beauty of the canyonlands, a sight no human besides Vance's team had ever witnessed. They were followed by teams of engineers and scientists who stepped onto the soil of Xylos with expressions of pure, unadulterated awe, their gazes immediately drawn to the shattered ruins of the Umbra Citadel, a puzzle they were already itching to solve. The silence was swiftly filled with the vibrant, chaotic din of human industry, the shouted orders of officers, the mechanical whir of construction, drones being unloaded, the low hum of portable generators coming online. The emptiness was being filled not just with people but with purpose. Vance turned from the organized chaos below to face his team, his gaze sweeping over their tired, proud faces, seeing in their eyes the same reflection of the incredible journey they had endured. The sun, climbing steadily higher, caught the scars on their armor and turned them into medals of honor. His voice, when he spoke, was not the roared command from the dropship or the grim report over the comms. It was quieter, steadier, carrying the weight of a truth that had been forged in the darkest night imaginable. "We came here to claim a rock shrouded in eternal night," he stated, his words simple and clear, meant only for them. "Look at what we've given them instead." He gestured not at the fleet but at the sky itself, at the light bathing the stark landscape. "We turned that endless darkness into a world of light. This is what Earth Marines do. We don't just fight the impossible battles, we change the very ground we stand on." His statement was more than a summation of their mission. It was a definition, a core truth about their role in the universe that had just been proven beyond any doubt. They were not merely soldiers, they were agents of profound change, the instrument through which humanity imposed its will, its hope, and its light upon the void. The arrival of the fleet was not their relief, it was their legacy being delivered, and as he looked out at the burgeoning operation, he made a final vow, a promise to the fallen, to the living, and to the future. "We will build here," he declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. We will build a city that reaches for that sun. We will make this planet a beacon, a testament written in stone and light to human resilience. To our courage and to everyone we left behind in the dark to make this dawn possible. The promise hung in the air, as solid and real as the sunlight warming the cold stone, a foundation laid for a future brighter than any of them could have ever imagined.